All right, friends, so we'll begin. So this week, we started the second book of the Torah. As we all know, it's called the Book of Shemos. Now, what does Shemos mean? Shemos means names. Why is it called the Book of Names? Because that's how it begins. It begins with Eilu Shemos B'nai Yisrael Haba Mitzrayim. These are the names of the Yidden went down to Mitzrayim. And it mentions the names of the 12 tribes, basically. So a number of obvious questions. Number one, we know their names. Why is it repeated again? We know we have their names several times, and their children, not just them, not just the 12, the Shvatim themselves, but their children is in Parshas Vayishlach and Parshas Vayetze, Parshas Vayigash, repeated several, the names are mentioned several times earlier. That's the first question. Second question is, the name of the whole book is called the Book of Names because of what? Because the first three psukim mention their names. How does that convey the whole theme of the book? In English, it's called the Book of Exodus. You understand? Because the theme of this book basically is the Exodus. Yetzias Mitzrayim. And names should reflect the content of that which is named for, not just a tag or a label, as we've had occasion to examine. So the question here is, we're talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the dominant theme, and then the building of the Mishkan afterwards. That's the whole book of the second book of the Torah, and it's called the Book of Names. So, well, what's the connection? So we're going to give several answers, one layer deeper than the other. The first question we asked, why the Torah repeats the names, is so obvious that Rashi asked the question. And Rashi's answer from the Medrash is, it's an expression of endearment, showing Hashem's love of the Jewish people. If you have something that's precious to you, so you count it frequently, they're counted also. We get the number, 70, and we know their numbers. Why count them? And what's the point even of counting anyway? What difference does it make what numbers they are? They're counted and their names. So expression of endearment. You have precious diamonds, you count them. You have precious objects that have names, you call them by their name, you identify them, you think about them. Each one of the things that you have with its name, you know its name, why you're referring to it, why you're thinking about it, why you're saying it, because it's an expression of endearment. So to the Jewish people are precious to Hashem. Therefore, he counts them frequently. And like the example is the stars in the heaven that have names. And the verse compares the Jewish people to the stars in the heaven. Hashem promised Avraham like the stars in the heaven. And they have names. So therefore, Hashem mentions the Yidden by name as expression of endearment. That's the basic answer. No new information. It's true. We know the number. We know the name. It's just expression of endearment. But explain that a little bit deeper. What's going on over here? So number one, the story that's starting now in this week's Parsha is Golus, going down into exile. That's a big thing, a big dominant theme. In fact, the whole book of Shemos, even after the rest of the Sefer, about the Torah and the building of the Mishkan, it's still in the desert. They haven't arrived home. It's still exile. But certainly the first few Parshas, it's the whole slavery in Egypt. Our sages tell us that every Golus is called Mitzrayim. Kol ha-Golus nikras Hashem Mitzrayim. Hashem shemitzidim es Yisrael. The word Mitzrayim means a constraint, a boundary, oppression, pressure. Every exile is pressure. So all exiles are called Mitzrayim. Pressure of one kind or another. Physical, spiritual, and sometimes both. So the Yidden go before the Yidden go down to Mitzrayim, we're counted, and Hashem mentions our name again. I'm going to fast forward the reason and then explain it. The reason is to endow us with the strength to be able to not just survive, not just disappear, not just melt. There's basically two kinds of exile, two kinds of threats. And both come to the same thing, disappear. One is destroy you, or assimilate, melt. But that's the pressure of exile. The pressure of exile is to become part of, to lose identity, and to become part of the surrounding environment, either because they buried you and you disappeared, or your ashes, or the melting pot, America, open arms, welcome, especially today, the new liberal thinking. All we got to do is abandon all differences. There are no differences. We're all one and the same, and everybody lives happily ever after. Disappear that way. Either way, it's the same threat. So before we go down and face this exile, and in Egypt they had both, because the early days was somewhat, well, actually, the early days when the tribes went down, life was beautiful. Then it ended up this slavery, and then worse than that. So before we go down to Mitzrayim, what does God do? He counts us and mentions us by name. What's the inyan? It's in order to, what's the idea? To endow us with the strength to resist, to disappear. And not only that, not just remain faithful Jews, it's not enough. As we all know, the purpose of going down to the world, into Egypt, is to transform it. Not just resist, but actively transform. But in order to do that, we have to have this strength that no matter where and what, our Jewish identity remains front and center, uncorruptible and eternal. So this is the idea of a number, first of all. And halacha is like this. Halacha recognizes that there's the law of life. The law of nature is that the majority absorbs the minority. There's the law of bittul. There's a law in halacha in hundreds of examples where something becomes nullified in something else, and it's deemed to have lost its identity and disappears and becomes no longer present. In the laws of kashrus, if a drop of milk by mistake falls into a pot stew, depending on the ratio and the taste and the color, all of the many details, but at the end of the day, it's, if you can't see it, you can't taste it, not identifiable, and if the ratio is 60-1 in the case of liquids, there's all kinds of ratios, 200-1, 1,000-1, 60-1, sometimes the majority is enough. It disappears, because that's the law of life, friends. The law of life is that a smaller, tiny particle in the face of overwhelming environment becomes absorbed, so much so that in halacha there's the idea of the chaticha atzma, nasa isur, that when a piece of meat is, in this case, falls into a milk stew, not only is it can happen, it disappears, it becomes part of the volume of the milk, depending on all kinds of factors. It actually becomes not just, it's gone, it's become part of the environment. It's the ultimate assimilation. It's even worse than you disappeared. You're one of us. So there are exceptions to this law of nullification. One is if it has a number. Any object that is sold, it's related to not by weight, by volume, but by number individually. If it has a number, it can be in the most overwhelming environment, it still remains viable, because one compared to a million is still something. $1, a penny. At the end of the day, $1 million, $1 billion is made up of a whole lot of pennies. So a number always, so therefore Hashem gives us a number. We got this census. Spiritually, it's to empower the Yid. No matter how overwhelming the environment might be, you remain distinct and separate. So that's why we counted. It's a spiritual injection to retain our identity, to count for something as an individual, no matter what, no matter how overwhelmed you are. That's in numbers, but then there's even a greater power, and that's the name. Hashem gives a name. He mentions Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and their children. Their names are mentioned again. What's the idea of a name? That goes even further. Let me explain. First, in halacha. In halacha, something which has a name also it's more than just, it doesn't get nullified. Let me tell you the halacha and you'll see. The halacha, for example, is as follows. In order to provide for the poor, the Torah mandated many laws, agricultural laws, also that affect money and livestock, that have to be given, mandatory things that have to be given to the poor. One of them is called shikha. Forget, meaning the farmer is now harvesting he's harvested his grain, and they're tied in bundles. They're tied in bundles, and now he goes to collect them. If he forgets one, he can't go back and get it. Or let's say an olive tree, better. It's a tree even. So it's even clearer to see. It's probably better. It's an example the Mishnah brings. And he forgets to harvest it. Once you've gone past it, you can't go back. Oh, I forgot this tree. Go back and get it. That belongs to the poor. But what if the tree is a unique tree? It has a name. He used to call it a name. Compared to the trees around it, whatever, it was producing less, was producing more. And it got his attention, and he gave it a name. So if the tree has a name because of a certain kind of olive tree, or just within a certain species, it was just unique that he called it by name, then there's no such thing as he forgot. He forgot consciously, but not subconsciously, because if he gave a name, it means his mind is still connected to it. He's already moved on. He can go back and harvest it because it's not considered forgetting. Because if he names something, it means it's that important to him that it remains part of him, even if he consciously forgot. But on a deeper level, he has not severed his connection to it because he named it. He named it. So too, this is the message here. In Golus, it looks like God has forgotten us. That's what it looks like. God will be abandoned and left to the whims of the surrounding environment in which the Jew finds himself, sometimes terrible. Hashem is saying, I've called you by name. It may appear to you, so I have not forgotten. We are connected. And in the law I just described, I'm going to get you. I'm going to bring you home. But you're not forgotten. So that's another component here to the significance of mentioning by name. It's all an empowerment, a connection that God is declaring that he has with every Jew, no matter what the environment is, no matter how overwhelmed you are. That's the number thing. No matter how much it appears, I forgot you, we've been abandoned. I have not. I have not. For my plan, it looks like it, but I have not. We remain intrinsically connected. Clear? Now we're going to go a little bit deeper, or another dimension to this. Very, very important message. The difference between a number and a name is that a number, in a sense, is everybody has you're one unit, you're one number. So a number brings out the equality. One, and then another one, then another one, another one. You have 10 people in a minyan. You need 10 people. So they equally comprise that minyan. What is like the big scholar is like he's worth 50%, 90%, and then the little guy, no, everybody is the same. Meaning that there is a level of our Jewishness which we're all the same. Of course, that's the pintalayid, that spark or yechida, the soul essence, which we all express, all have equally, that no power in the world can nullify. It's a flame that can't be extinguished. Just a little bit further insight over here. You may have noticed in Chabad, the person who has a yahrzeit or is leading the service, anyone that is leading the service because either it's the year of mourning or a yahrzeit, we have 5 candles. Other places have 2. I'm talking about at the Omid, aside from the yahrzeit candle, of course, that you light on the yahrzeit, or some people have a flame going for the whole year, for the first year. Aside from that, when you daven, 5 candles. Why 5 candles? Because there's 5 levels to the neshama. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chayi, yechid. What are these 5 levels? Very briefly, Nefesh is behavior, action, words. The next level is emotion, going deeper in the person. Feelings, level 2. Level 3, intellect, mind. Level 4, rotzen, will. And there's a 5th level. The 5th level is the core essence of the neshama. This 5th level is unique only to the Jew. Let me tell you a little halacha. It's a fascinating thing. The Gemara in Yevamah says like this. The Gemara is discussing there about a woman whose husband left. Now, what conditions are required for us to establish that he is? What evidence is enough for us, the court, to accept that he's dead, that now frees her to get remarried? That's a very complex subject. After the war, this was a huge problem. After any war, after the Second World War, did he die? Didn't he die? What evidence is considered enough to free her to marry? It's a very serious question because she's still married and she has children. The next one, the mamzerim, it's a very, very serious thing, a huge problem. The biggest rabbis were dealing with after the Second World War. What evidence? They saw him taken on the train. Is that enough? He was in the camp. Which camp? What kind of camp? Whatever. So it's a very, very serious question. So here the Gemara says like this. There's a court, witnesses, and there's someone at a distance who says, such and such a person died. Now, normally we accept what one witness who says he died, that she's now free to marry. So the Gemara says, how do we know that this is a person and not a shed? A shed is in English a demon. Now, this brings up the whole question. We believe in demons. The answer is yes. Are they around nowadays? The answer is no. What are they? For another time. But yes, demons, forces in the world that are not holy. Maybe it's a demon. And therefore he's just, on the contrary, wants to cause this trouble, that she should marry, and then the husband will show up, and the children are mamzerim, and that's a tragedy. Can't marry other people, only mamzerim, aside from all the other problems. The mother says, and there was a story that actually happened. They heard this voice. They couldn't see, but they heard the voice. You saw the person, you could tell. But hear a voice. So the mother says that they saw that the shadow, so there is a person, a shadow. The Gemara says, no, a demon can have a shadow. The Gemara says they saw that the shadow made a shadow. Oh, bavur de bavur is less lahu. A shadow of a shadow, demons don't have. This is definitely a person. So on the basis of this voice that came from an entity who didn't actually see him, he saw this person cast a shadow, and the shadow made a shadow. So what is it? Why am I even telling you this? Because this is telling us something extraordinary. What is a shadow? I told you there's 3 levels of consciousness. 3: behavior, emotion, intellect. That's a person. He says, he speaks, that's behavior. His feelings, his mind, and that's physically brain, heart, hands, feet, action. This corresponds to the 3 davening we do a day. Then there's a 4th level of the soul. It's called a willpower. Now, this is called a shadow because, like a shadow is outside the body, will is higher than intellect and higher than emotion. It's a transcendent force. Will, what's will? The desire to exist, the survival instinct. That's the deepest power within nature. And all nature has this. Any living thing at its core is survival. That's common to all nature. I want to live. That's the shadow, that transcendent, all-embracing. The shadow surrounds the person. Willpower is higher than intellect, higher than emotion. It surrounds and envelops the whole person. It's what drives everything we do. I want to succeed. I want to exist. I want to succeed. Then there's the shadow of the shadow. What's that? That's not the I want anything. That is the soul. Only a Jew has this. This is the 5th level. It's called Yechida. And that's why Yom Kippur, the quintessentially Jewish day, has 5 services in the Ila. Because what's that? Not I want anything. That's the part of the soul, that's part of Hashem, completely selfless, bound up with God. Not I want. There's no I. It's you. So this entity, the shadow, didn't have a shadow, means they could sense whatever the story that this was a Jew was speaking, because the demon, which means anything other than the Jew, doesn't have a shadow of a shadow. In this case, there's a lot of detail here, but you get the idea. The idea of the shadow is not just willpower, but the soul essence. Now, the census numbering, it's saying every Jew has this yechida. It's a flame, it's indistinguishable, inextinguishable. It's forever a Jew. And that no exile can take away. No matter what the Jew does, he remains fundamentally Jewish, and therefore can always come back and will come back. He can renounce his Jewishness. It's not going to help him. You're a Jew like Moishe, Rabbi, like Moses, like Rabbi Akiva. And that's in the deepest exile. Before we're going down to Egypt, Hashem counts them every year, and their descendants, you and I thereafter. Every Jew counts equally. What's the name? Not only do I count because I'm a Jew, the name expresses my unique character. My name, and a person's name, by the way, is a combination of his name, his mother's name, his father's name, grandparents. Unique. I exist, and my uniqueness is something that no force in the world can take away. This is critical. It's critical. I have a unique contribution that has my signature, my name, that I need to contribute, that no force in the world can overwhelm, can erase. Hashem not just gives us my number, I'll always be Jewish, but what am I going to contribute? What am I going to, my name, what mark am I going to make? Nothing. Okay? That's also something, I'm a forever Jew. You saw the story recently, was going on the internet of this child that parents put him into the convent before the beginning of the war, grew up as a Roman Catholic and became a priest. In the end, he has to be buried as a Jew. He was a priest till the end, but he made sure that you saw it. I mean, the pictures of it in Krakow. I think it was in Krakow. They made him, and he wanted a completely Jewish burial. The shliach was there. The whole beautiful story. Rabbi Jacobs tells the story. So that I am a Jew is forever. That's forever. But much more than that, your name, your unique contribution that's unique and different to anybody else. This we also have the power to be able to contribute. This is where it's time to transform, not just resist the exile, but transform it by making a difference, leaving your unique mark. That's the name. That's the second thing we said, not just to remain Jewish in exile, but we're here to change it. Put your name up. Well, it means literally. Leave your mark. You have unique talents. Each one has a unique contribution. What difference have I made different to you? Sorry, we're all doing mitzvahs, but something unique to you. That's the name. And no power in the world can take away your uniqueness. Not just that you were a Yid. Me as an individual. That's the name property. And this Hashem gives us as well. We've got a minute or two left. We're going to go deeper in the idea of a name, the paradox of a name, which I guess we'll continue next week. And that is, it's connected to what we're saying. Just want to take it to the next level. Shakespeare Lahavzil said, what's in the name? What do you need? The person himself needs his name. If you live on a desert island, you don't need a name. The name you need is for somebody else to call you, to refer to you. Of course, you'll need a name. Probably you call yourself a name, you start talking to yourself. But in theory, it's a tag, it's a label. It's a very external, most external part of you. My name is Moishe ben such and such, whatever, named after, whatever, but it's just a tag. So much so a person can change his name. In halacha, a person can change his name. You're the owner of your name, you can change it. So the first name. A person can change even his first name. So we add names sometimes. We shouldn't have to when a person's ill. So it's very external. You just need it for others to identify you. And yet, here's the paradox. The paradox is like this. A name gets your attention like nothing else. Which means when someone calls you, you're sitting, and someone says, Your name is Yankel. Yankel, when you turn to that person who called you, you're turning with every part of you, with the depth of you. That's being summoned. Now, the next second, when you're going to see what they want you for, then you'll engage that encounter with, whatever limited, what it is they want. Give me something, whatever it is. The next second after you've turned, I'm talking about that moment of, that just moment, your name was called, as opposed to the next moment, which you then will invest or turn away, ignore, whatever you're going to do. Just the moment of calling a name captures your entire identity. You turn with everything. Famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek was a little child, the third Rebbe. He was sitting on his grandfather's lap, the Alter Rebbe, the altar of the Tanya. He was 2 years old, maybe younger. And the Alter Rebbe says to him, "Where's Zayde?" So he's sitting on his lap and he goes like this, points to, says, "No, that's Zayde's nose." Then he holds him here, touches him. "No, that's Zayde's beard." So the kid saw where this is going. He stopped. He gets off his father's lap, his Zayde's lap, and he goes to the corner. And then he gives a call, "Zayde." And the Rebbe turns to him, and the child says, "Oh, there's Zayde. Oh, das is Zayde." When the child called and he turned, that moment you turned, not with your nose, with your beard. You were entirely present for that moment captured. That's how we find also when a person faints, when you're trying to revive him, so it says, whisper the Jewish name in their ear, and that can revive them, because when a person faints, the soul is leaving to some degree. By saying the name and the Ben, whatever it is, you are summoning the soul back. So we're running out of time for it, but what I'm bringing out is the paradox of the name. It's a very external part of me. These are the names of Elish, Moishe, Bnei Yisrael. These are the names of the Yidden that went down to Egypt. What it's saying is, which part of me is in exile? Very external part of me. The depth of my soul is not. But next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, or next time we talk, just like we said the paradox before, that the name somehow summons the essence. By going into exile, this reveals the essence of my Jewishness, the depth of who I am, that being in heaven in the most beautiful environment doesn't summon forth. It's exile. It's only my name, the external part of my soul that is imprisoned in this body altogether. The depth of my neshama is not imprisoned to the body, doesn't come down to the world, not exiled. The point is that only by investing in this world, as external as it is in terms of the soul, that in this world and the struggle of this world, this unlocks the depth of me that I could be in heaven forever and never touch. This will explain, God willing, not next time, another occasion, the paradox of the name, and it applies to Hashem as well. We talk about it. Shema Yachad, on that day, he'll be one, his name will be one. What does all this mean? It's a paradox of the name. External part of me, you're connected to the depth of me. Touches me like nothing else. Like nothing else. And that's what exile does. It brings out the depth of who I am, that in a non-exile, the non-challenged world will never come to the fore. All right, friends.